Hello, welcome to this month's edition of Motor Mouth, brought to you by the Boyertown Museum of Historic Vehicles. I'm Kendra.
I'm Dan.
And as always, we're sitting here in the Reading Diner, which a few days ago was quite the happening scene. We had our 5th diner day. Very successful, I think.
Yeah. Good pie.
It was good pie. And we were really excited, too, to have a lot of Motor Mouth alumni here. Yeah, sure.
Alumni or celebrities?
Celebrities,
Yeah.
Yes.
That's even better.
Some previous guests were here. Sam from last month with the Turnpike.
Right.
He was here. Ethan, who had his 1970, I think it was, his Cougar,
right.
a few months ago. He was here. He was actually volunteering. He was our main bus boy, and he did a great job. We had Bob Dare here, who was on before to talk about the SGV. Mark,
The 56 Corvette guy.
Corvette owner. He was here.
Yeah, he was here with his friend Denny, and if you watched the times we've talked to Mark on the phone, you see Denny from about his knees down underneath the car, so I got to meet the rest of them.
Yeah, all of Denny came.
Yeah.
It was nice.
And that was the first time I've met him. So.
And Tracy and Elizabeth, who were on our Duryea Day show, they had the truck, the Boyertown truck that was on the trailer.
With a little bit of surface rust.
Yeah, just a little.
Yeah.
Just a little. And they were here all the way from Virginia, which was cool to see them again. An honorable mention to Maribeth,
Yes.
who had the Mustang.
Yeah.
She was not here, but
Her uncle was here, who she's working with it on. Yeah, they're working together on it, and she was talking about him, and he was here, and as well as her mom and her aunt and her grandmother. So that was from Central Jersey.
it was neat. So it was like a little reunion here
Yeah.
on Saturday. But we had a great time.
People come far and wide.
Yes, they do. So if you missed it, shame on you. But the next one is April 2nd. It's a while yet.
April 2nd.
But mark it now. Just mark it down now. So, well, here the museum is open Tuesdays through Sundays, 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. And we are closed Mondays and major holidays, and we got one coming up this month. We are closed Thanksgiving Day, but we will be open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So if you have people in from town visiting family, this would be a great time to come visit the museum.
Central Jersey or Virginia. Or,
Come on. We had, I think, this is not official. We had at least 4 different states represented here Saturday for Diner Day, which was pretty cool. So bring your out-of-state or just out-of-town friends and family over Thanksgiving weekend. Just not on Thursday. We will be closed Thanksgiving Day. And then the rest of the year, we're going to ride out relatively quietly. We are part of the holiday open house tour that goes on every year here in Boyertown. We're a stop, and that's Friday, December 4th. And we'll be having refreshments. Will you be here?
Yes.
I didn't warn you about that, did I?
Yes.
Didn't ask you beforehand. We usually have extra people in the gallery to answer questions. We're going to have a blacksmith back on that night. We had a blacksmith here Saturday, and he was really popular, so he'll be back on Friday, December 4th. So we hope you all join us for that.
It's my dad's birthday.
Is it? We always do stuff on people's birthdays, don't we?
Yep.
Bring Dad.
I'd like to.
It's a long drive.
Yeah.
Well, before we get on to our show tonight, I was looking online earlier today, and I saw, last month we talked about the Turnpike, and we had Sam on, who we just mentioned, and we were talking about the history of the Turnpike because the Turnpike turned 75 this year, and I saw this really, to me it was interesting, this neat study that they just did, how the Turnpike basically has hundreds of drivers per day that don't pay their toll, which is quite a drain, as you can imagine, on their revenue. Either people go through the Easy Pass and they don't have Easy Pass, or they go through Easy Pass and they have the little I don't even know what you call it.
Thing.
The little plastic thing, which you're supposed to mount on your windshield, but some people have several cars and only one transponder. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yes.
So they just wave the transponder, but they don't do it properly, which means they don't actually pay their fine. And the turnpike, they take your photo if you don't pay your fine and say they'll fine you like $25 plus whatever the fee should have been. But they don't really enforce that as strongly as they want to. They're actually asking to enforce it, have more what do you want to say, leeway in enforcing it now, because right now I guess they turn all that over to a collection agency, and they have like 1.5 million people a year they need to try and track down. And now, as the booths are turning more and more over to the computerized system, they're trying to get rid of actual cash tolls. They want more enforcement for this.
I can help them get rid of cash toll. I won't pay next time.
Yeah, see, you're doing a service.
Drive right through.
But anyway, that just came out like a few days ago, and I thought it was interesting because we were just talking about the turnpike and how they're always trying to modernize. And
Now,
here's a little hiccup they run into.
Did you have the amount of money we're losing, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania per year?
I thought it was, let's see.
Wow.
The fiscal year ending in May, $33.3 million in outstanding tolls.
That's
a lot of money.
A bundle of money.
That really is. So they need to figure out, I guess, how to collect that somehow. But so I read that and I was thinking about last month, and there's always stuff going on. So.
Okay.
And now I think I'm going to actually turn it over to you right now.
Yeah. Okay. We have a slight dilemma here in the museum, and it's not earth-shattering or anything, but we're going to ask our viewers if they would be able to help. And we're going to go out to one of our cars now. I'll explain what's going on and tell you how you can help us, okay?
Okay, well, we're at the museum's 1909 Middleby, and why? What's our big mystery that we're...
Okay, it's not really a mystery, or is it? I don't know. You'll figure, you can tell me if it is or not. But we were looking at this engine here. This is the air-cooled engine, 1909 Middleby, and this is like high-tech stuff for 1909, air-cooled. And we were wondering, as in a normal engine, you have your intake and exhaust valves here at the top, and you got the cylinder here, piston going up and down, just like on a normal engine. But there's another exhaust valve here on the bottom. And we were saying, what in the world? Why is that there? And we got talking, and we sort of figured it out. And I also looked up some information on it, which I'm going to read to you in a moment. And it'll explain what's going on here. And then I'll come up with a burning question that we have. Okay? Now, I'm going to read, this is out of Automobile Dealer and Repairer magazine of March 1909. So this was printed the same time this car was being made. And this is something from H.H. Franklin, who built the Franklin automobiles that were known for their air-cooled engine, okay? And he goes on talking about the good stuff about air-cooled versus water-cooled engine, and he's saying there's a lot less stuff to be concerned with, like the radiators and hoses and water fittings, so on and so forth. And you remember back in 1909, cars used to rattle and shake a lot, so those things could get damaged, they could break with the rattling. Air-cooled, you had nothing of that, so you didn't have to worry about that. Also, with water-cooled, during the winter, you had to get some sort of antifreeze in it, and antifreeze in 1909 was nothing like it is today, so you had a chance of actually having your water jackets freeze and burst open. So it eliminated that too. So here again we have 1909 high-tech air-cooled engines. And let me read you something he says in it, and it's about a paragraph long, so it's a number of sentences here. The efficiency of air cooling has been increased with the continued refinement of the engine during the short history of the automobile. Until now, air-cooled engines are made that with the use of simple auxiliary exhaust at the base of the cylinder, there's your auxiliary exhaust at the base there, It will get rid immediately upon the completion of the power stroke of 71% of the burned gases, leaving only 29% to pass up through the cylinder and out through the regular exhaust, again on the top here. This system secures the discharge immediately after its work is done of most of the material which formerly remained for a period to heat the cylinder walls. This arrangement as it stands today is an accompaniment of only air-cooled engines. So there you go. You have this to get rid of the burned gases. As soon as that piston goes down, it's starting to exhaust out of here, okay? Whereas in before, you'd have to have the piston going up to push the air out or the exhaust out. And again, because it's air-cooled, you want things to be as cool as possible. The less that hot gas is in there, the cooler it will run. You also notice on here it has the fins on each cylinder. It's a four-cylinder car, of course, and it has the fins, more surface for the air to cool, the air to move over and cool it. Oh, and something else I wanted to mention about this. You see, this is the fan. It looks nothing like the fan you see in your car today, but this would be pulling in the air. There's an open grill work here in the front of the car. If the hood was on, we took it off so you could see things better. Also, in the back, where the flywheel would be, there's a fan cast into it. It has veins and opening there. So the airflow will go right through the engine. The hood goes over, everything's sealed in. Also, on the bottom, it's sort of like a belly pan, I guess, underneath the engine. So you have this basic wind tunnel here. Okay, now the question is, there's an exhaust pipe here. This is only for the top exhaust valve. You have a second exhaust pipe on the back or on the bottom here for the auxiliary. Both exhaust pipes go all the way to the end, so you have dual exhaust in this car. Huh? Only one of the exhaust, the auxiliary, has a muffler to it. Now on the muffler, there's a little valve. It's like a cutoff valve. Normally, a cutoff valve would be used for higher performance in the engine. In other words, the cutoff valve would be ahead of the muffler, and if you need a little bit more speed or power of the car, you open the cutoff valve, you have better exhaust coming out, better flowing, instead of being kind of slowed up by the muffler. But this cutoff valve completely cuts off the exhaust, and that's where you, the viewer, comes in. You don't have to come in and tell, but I'm inviting you to come over. I'm here on Saturdays, you can come. There's another gentleman called Tom. You ask for one of us, and we'll be glad to show this to you. Let you crawl under the car, whatever, and this would be kind of neat. We've discussed this a little bit. It took us a little bit of time to figure out what's going on with the auxiliary valve, but then to add things, we have this cutoff valve. So you come during a Saturday or even during the week. Tom's here most of the time, or quite often, and so you can help us solve this. Did you understand all that, Kendra? Or did you already know why that's there?
I don't know why that's there.
Okay, you didn't know there was one there, a cutoff valve.
I remember hearing that, sorry, this is sort of related to the air-cooled part, the belly pan.
Yes.
Did you hear the story that when it came here,
I heard
it wouldn't run?
I heard of, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I guess it overheated.
Yeah.
And they couldn't figure out why, and someone got the bright idea to put the belly pan on.
Yes, and it runs.
Because as you said, it needs to be there to, in fact, make the wind tunnel.
And Franklin Automobiles, what I read here is from the founder of Franklin Automobiles. You know, the early Franklins had the same sort of setup here, that wind tunnel thing, but then I think in around 1911 or 12, somewhere in there, they changed things and they enclosed the engine and in an air-cooled pocket almost. It was very, a lot different. You could hardly see the engine because of the cladding it had on it. So that's it. We're standing here amongst our current exhibit in the lobby of the museum. And we have a bunch of cars here. and they're little cars, small cars,
Yeah.
cycle cars.
Yeah.
And that's all kind of terms that they use for these types of cars. And it's a special exhibit, and we have one here that's on loan, and the others are from the museum, and Kendra's going to talk about them.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
basically, what's in the lobby here is cycle or light, because we did sneak the dial in here, and that's too big to be considered a cycle car, really. So, but it's a light car.
It's a light car.
Yeah. And cycle cars, they kind of started, it seems to be in 1910 in France, actually, with something called, and I'm not going to pronounce this right, a bedelia. I didn't take
Sounds like
French.
a type of onion.
The onion car was built in 1910 in France. It's a Bedelia, and in France, I don't know how you would say that. But you'll see a picture of it there on the screen, and it has tandem seating, so that means one seat in the front, one seat in the back, and a very narrow tread because of that. And the driver actually sat in the rear of the car. You'll see the steering wheel sticking up there, and that was kind of to balance out the weight of the engine.
Am I getting ahead of you here, or can I ask now, what was the thought pattern of having these little tiny cars?
Well, a little bit, but we can, in Europe at least, and this is going to be an effect that we'll see here in the United States. In Europe, taxes on your registration and licenses are based on the size of the engine.
Okay.
So if you have a smaller engine, you won't pay as much. And that's why this fad has more of a foothold over in Europe than it will. That's one reason. Than it will here, because here it doesn't matter. No matter what size the engine, all those fees are going to stay the same. So it's not that it really hurts it, but it's an advantage that they have in Europe that they don't really have over here, so to speak. And Great Britain was into these cycle cars too. They had an early one called the GN, and there's a photo of it. It's kind of strange looking, but one of the engineers there was Archibald Fraser Nash.
Oh, okay, I've heard of Fraser Nash, because they made cars up into the 50s, I think.
So early on, he was making this crazy looking thing. But in America, or the United States, they think they kind of attributed the first cycle car to a Karl Probst. And he built that in Detroit in 1912, and like that French car, whose name I can't say, it had the tandem seat with the one in the front and the one in the back. And ironically, he called this the Dodo. I don't know why you'd call a car a Dodo. It's like you're dooming it to failure before it even gets anywhere.
An extinct bird, right?
Yes, exactly, which is going to kind of foreshadow the whole cycle car craze that was going on in the teens. Now, Probst didn't hang around very long. He kind of left very soon after the prototype phase of this Dodo that he designed. And he moved on to the Milburn Wagon Works, which built electric cars, and we have a Milburn in our collection. It's so funny how all these places are all interconnected. Now, you and I have said that millions of times.
He moved on like as a company engineer type?
The only thing I read, it was very vague. I didn't have enough time to research what else he did there exactly. We'll have to do that for next show, and we'll try to update you on what exactly he did. But as you and I have always noted, these places, they share names and people and all this stuff, and that's just another example of that going on. So basically, what is a cycle car? Well, the Horseless Age in 1913 said, quote, "It's hard to formulate a suitable definition."
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're going to encounter as we go on. Now, there was something called the American Cycle Car Manufacturers Association. And it met for the first time in Chicago in January of 1914. And they basically defined a cycle car to be a four-wheeled vehicle with an engine displacement not exceeding 71 cubic inches.
Okay.
And even that definition is going to start expanding and becoming a lot more flexible.
And that was a cycle car, correct?
Yes.
That's the definition.
And because there's going to be approximately 200 cycle car manufacturers, technically. It's hard to gauge really how many there were because, as you know, the records weren't that great. And some of these companies probably never even got to a prototype. They drew up designs and never built. But essentially, a cycle car is lightweight. It's usually kind of like a no-frills car. Usually 1 or 2 cylinder engines, usually air-cooled. We were just talking about the middle be air-cooled. And Spackey of Indianapolis made a lot of these engines. And in fact, our Duryea has the Spackey V-type engine in it. That's on display here. They are often chain or belt driven as a way to avoid the more conventional differential. And typically they get a better gas mileage. Now Model T gets about 20 some, and usually the cycle cars advertise that they got 40 to 50. The Gem over here that we have, they advertised it as getting 65.
Wow.
Who knows? But of course, back in the 19-teens, no one really cared about that too much.
No,
they do now.
Right.
Gas was cheap. It wasn't really a big deal. And they often had wood frames like fir or pine to cut down on the weight and the cost. That's going to be a problem later. You can probably imagine. But like I said, the definition is really fluid. I mean, this is an article from Automobile Quarterly that I'm just reading some examples here. Cycle car transmissions might include jack shafts or cardan shafts from which the drive belts or chains ran to the rear wheels. In the case of the Gem, with its roller pinion drive, there were no such shafts. The most sophisticated cycle cars had 4-speed plus reverse gearboxes, though a 2-speed planetary or sliding gear arrangement was more common. So again, there's a lot of variation. Usually they had friction discs rather than conventional clutches. Brakes were frequently little more than hardwood blocks, which pressed against a wheel or a pulley. However, some cycle cars, like the Malcolm and the Scripps Booth, had internal expanding drum brakes on the rear wheel. So, I mean, it's really fluid. Like I said, it's hard to define. So,
and something about this too, and I keep coming across this. We were talking 1914 was that definition you mentioned earlier. So it's, you know, sort of the beginning of the car industry, or near the beginning. And there's a lot of experimentation going on. That's why what you just read now, there's all different ideas about the way the rear wheels or the wheels were driven and the brakes and this and that, and a lot of different things. And you know, we have these cars that's around us right now. We can go in and find all sorts of differences in them. But yet they're all kind of catering to the same group of people.
Right, there's no standards to follow like we have now. So there was a lot more freedom to experiment and do really whatever you thought you could concoct. You were basically free to do that.
And it was all in advertising. Your car was the best car.
Exactly.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. And hopefully you ignored the fact that there were hundreds of other car companies out there to choose from. So, but you'll like this. The first cycle car competition in the United States was in Teaneck, New Jersey.
Good old Teaneck.
Yeah, on June 13th, 1914. So they were doing, you know, competition type stuff. Typically, a lot of cycle cars didn't make it through the races that they held for it. We'll get into that later. They were also, because of their lightweight and very basic construction, they usually ran to about $300 to $400 for a cycle car. So compare that to a Model T in 1913, which is $550. It goes down to $490 in 1914, and so you know, and that's a no-frills automobile, really. And they were really into their cute little names. Usually, it seems, you'll see some ads here. The Oh We Go. Oh yeah. Which was made in Owego, New York.
Yeah, I've seen that. There's one floating around up there.
It's great. The Zip Car, the Dudley Bug, which you'll see a photo of here, the Dudley Bug, although it's like a bird's eye view of it, and you'll see the seats are staggered. That was another way to arrange the seats. Instead of having them right next to each other, like all the cars in here in the lobby.
So it's like you would be driving and I'm the passenger.
And you're a little
back
behind
here.
me, yeah.
Okay.
But still to my side. So this was all to cut down on, a lot of it to cut down on your tread path. And the Woods Mobilette was another popular one. And they had this great instruction in one of their ads that if you did not have a garage or anything, a building in which to keep your car, you could just get some rough lumber and make a box that was 4.5 feet wide and 8.5 to 9 feet long, and put a door on the one end, and it would save it from thieves and storms.
I could see these cars getting stolen too, because you could just pick them up.
I know. And Duryea, with his gem, advertised that one person could flip it on its side and fix it if it got a flat or whatever. So
I don't know if you have this in what you research there, but there's these cars like the Orient Buckboard, I believe, and which were, they almost look like like a sled, a wooden sled with wheels.
with a little steering wheel.
Yeah, and you know, they have this little motor in the back, and Smith made one, and there's a few of them, and they're little tiny things, and they're only, you're sitting this high off the ground, and 4 little wheels, and
Probably not the greatest arrangement with
I
your
think-
roads and the
I
roads
think if
being as
you're
bad as
a
they were.
rich kid, maybe you would end up with one of them.
Yeah, they almost looked like a kid's toy, like a rich kid's toy. The idle riches toys, yeah. Even though they're cheap.
Yeah.
And we, you know, a lot of these companies had these dreams of exporting their cars.
Okay.
And supposedly, although it seems maybe this was more of a PR thing, that foreign countries wanted these cars from America because they were thought to be more rugged because our roads were so terrible compared to everyone else, that we would make a stronger car, that our cars were a little more comfortable than the European or the foreign versions. A lot of these cars didn't really have any of that come to fruition, though, of being exported. So why did they fail, Dan? What do you think?
Why do I think? I think because
It was a very short-lived fad.
the car industry is getting better and better. And you mentioned the Ford was $500 roughly compared to what, 350, I think?
In the early days.
But the Ford could carry 4 people. It could go further. It was
Tougher.
more rugged. Yeah, you had ground clearance like this instead of that. And I think it was just better.
Yeah, a lot of it was poor construction and poor engineering. Those wood frames, like the pine and the fir, really took a beating on the terrible roads that we had. And it's kind of a story with the normal cars, we'll say, where all these people had dreams of making a lot of money and got into the business and didn't necessarily know what they were doing. I mean, that's happened here too. And Henry Ford, it was interesting, he doesn't seem to have ever really been interested in making a cycle car, but he did make a 3/4 Model T, basically. And he put it on display. He only made this one. And he put it on display, and everyone was talking about it, of course. Well, then a lot of these cycle car companies lost their financial backing because no one wanted to compete with him, and they thought he was going to get into the industry. He never did. Typical Henry Ford sounding practice. And like you said, you know, he started paying his workers enough money that they could buy a Model T. Well, let's buy a Model T instead of the little wood board with a steering wheel. So
Little wood board with a steering wheel. I like that.
that's what some of them look like, as you were describing. I found this too. You'll like this. This is our other New Jersey tidbit. In New Jersey, well, first of all, this seating, the tandem type seating, where you have the one person in the front and the passenger in the back. One of the pros to doing that was to narrow your tread, and that you could actually fit in the tread of normal-sized automobiles. You didn't have to drive in those ruts.
Okay, yep.
But unfortunately, that was illegal in New Jersey, as imp dealers found out. Imp, another Cute little name.
Yeah.
Because of a law that dates back to 1787 in New Jersey that fined 20 shillings to drive a vehicle with a gauge less than 4 foot 10 inches over public roads.
How dare they?
I know. And New Jersey also prohibited selling axles that were shorter than 4 foot 10 inches.
4 foot 10 inches, 56 inches, 58 inches.
So these narrow tread ones kind of advertised that they could do like 28.
So the state of New Jersey was the downfall of the
Single-handedly.
single-handedly. Sorry. I'm
all
from
right.
New Jersey.
Forgive that for now. So, you know, like we mentioned a few of the ones, the Gem, the Dial, which is a little too big. We consider that more of a light car. And behind me we have a 1921 Hanover, which was built in New York. And a little later, cycle car phase was pretty much dead by the time the Hanover came out. But the Hanover still kind of was following that vein. But the car we're sitting next to here, this is on loan to us from Mark Surface, and he owns this 1910 Kelsey Motorette. And this car itself is, the whole story behind it is interesting, I think. Kelsey is named for its builder, get this, Cadwallader Washburn Kelsey.
That's a mouthful.
He liked to be called Carl.
Carl's better, yeah, Carl.
Well, he was a Chestnut Hill native, so right outside of wealthy section of Philadelphia. And in 1897, at the age of 17, he built his first car, and that had 4 wheels. But a year later, he built a 3-wheeled car called an Auto Tri, and you'll see a photo of that here on the screen. And he built that with his friend Sheldon Tilney. And their fathers were both angry about this because they believed that the cars in general were the instrument of the devil. So they told their boys to go back to their studies at Haverford College and to forget all this car business, which they did for a while. But then Kelsey, after he graduated, he still was building cars a little bit, but he actually was quite successful selling cars. He opened up a Maxwell dealership in Philadelphia, and eventually, really, because of him, more Maxwells were sold in Philly than anywhere else in the country. He was quite the salesman. So I think he became like the VP of marketing or whatever they called it back then, and at Maxwell. And this kind of gave him the encouragement to go back and build cars again. So he came back with, in 1910, another 4-wheeled car called the Spartan, and the 3-wheeled car, the Motorette, which is what we have here. And this one is a 1910. This is one of the first Kelseys he built then. We think he built about 200 of these Motorettes. I have no idea how many are left. It can't be that many.
I know 2.
Ooh, you know 2.
I know of 2, yeah.
Ooh.
I think there was one that's just recently for sale.
Oh yes, I did hear about that.
And then there's this one.
And then this one. And he only incorporated the Kelsey Motor Car Company in 1920. It took him a while, and it closed in 1924, so he wasn't around too long. And after that, he stops building cars pretty much, except shortly before he died in 1970, he did build a 2-passenger Skycar helicopter, which would be really interesting to see. Now, this car in particular, it has been repainted, I should say, but it really has never been restored. The seats are original. The top has been replaced, but it is a leather top like it should have been. It's what that would have looked like back in 1910. And the car was assembled in Hartford, Connecticut. However, we believe that most of the parts were built in the Philadelphia area.
Because, you know, I always thought this to be a Philadelphia-built car. And I was looking at the literature that we have, and it all says Hartford, Connecticut.
Yeah.
Every one of them. So.
Yeah. Well, we know at least the engine is Pennsylvania built. It's under the seat. It's a 2-stroke, 2-cylinder opposed 10 horsepower engine, and it was built by Cumming Foundry and Machine,
Okay.
which is in Williamsport,
Yep.
Pennsylvania.
Still.
So we know that the engine is a Pennsylvania product
okay.
at least. Let's see, this is actually a water-cooled engine. It's probably one of the first water-cooled ones he used because he did mostly deal with air-cooled. So again, that makes it a little different. It has a planetary transmission, 2-speed forward and 1 reverse. It is chain drive, as you can see. Oh, nice big back wheel there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only 9 feet long, and it's only 5 foot 3 inches wide, so
So
it
you
would
could
be
build-
allowed in New Jersey.
So you could build a box for it, and
You
so
could. The
people wouldn't
box
steal
length
it.
would be fine. It would just have to be taller. So, yeah.
Or you can take the roof off.
Or that.
Yeah.
The roof down, and we're good. It's got the non-skid tires.
I saw that. So non-skid.
And as you can see, it only is a 2-seater, and that's pretty typical for all these cars. You know, they don't have like a touring version of cycle cars. They're 1 or 2-seaters. They did, it seems, try to build like rickshaw type Kelseys, and even like a panel delivery type thing. It looks
Okay.
like a bicycle with a big box, a tricycle, I should say, with a big box on the front. You'll see a
Front.
photo of that.
Okay, I've seen photos of vehicles like that.
And that's kind of unique. I mean, some of these cycle car companies did try to do that, build some panel delivery type stuff, but that's kind of unusual too. And it gets a top speed, I'm told, of 25 miles per hour. So
I was wondering on how this thing drives. If you steer it, you know, I've heard things about 3-wheel vehicles.
yeah.
You know, unless that might be if the front is a single wheel and you have the 2 in the back. Because I
I'm
don't
not
know.
sure because, well, and then like the Gem is the 3-wheel too, but it's got, like you said, the single wheel
Yeah.
up front.
We'll have to ask for a ride
We
when
will.
he picks it up.
And Mark, the owner, he told me they did have this running a few years ago. It hasn't run for a few years, and I don't think anything's really
I remember,
wrong with it.
I
It's
remember
just-
seeing this at Duryea Day.
Yes, this
years ago.
This did go to Duryea Day at least once. I think a couple times. So maybe if you were at Duryea Day, what was that? Maybe 10 years ago. Maybe it was there.
Maybe, yeah.
You might have seen
8.
this. Yeah, he and his son have taken it out driving. It just hasn't been started up in a few years, so it might need a little work, but it has everything it needs to.
So,
run.
so where did this car come from? I mean, you don't find these everywhere. You know, you don't go to, you know, like the used car lot and find one of these,
Yeah.
or do you?
Well, they don't know who owned it originally. The earliest year they have on as far as owner is 1954, and it was owned by a couple in Martinsburg, West Virginia. And they found that out because an owner's card got left underneath the seat, basically, is how they figured
Okay.
that out.
It's where my parents live, Martinsburg.
Oh.
So
You should ask
Okay.
them if they knew Ralph and Margaret Burkhart of
I'll
Martinsburg,
ask
West Virginia.
I know a Burkhart down there, friends of my parents.
Ah.
Wouldn't that be interesting?
That would be. Report
So,
back. They had an
okay,
auto
I
parts
will.
business. Does that help?
I don't know. I know he has a 28 Buick. So
Maybe he had a 1910 Kelsey at one point in
Maybe.
his life.
okay.
Um,
Anyway,
But they never had kids, so when they died, all their cars were auctioned off. And actually, it was bought by a Pennsylvania resident. He lived in Milford, PA, and then it moved to Cressona, an owner there. And then finally, Mark bought it in 2005 from that Cressona, Pennsylvania owner, and he's had it ever since. But yeah, so we don't know really the first 44 years of its life. We don't really know who owned it.
okay. Could be anybody.
Could be. So that's the Kelsey. That's a little bit on cycle cars here. So we hope you come and see this really cool car in person and the other neat little cars we have with it in the lobby here.
And it is interesting, and maybe you can see in the background, there are other cars here, and you know, each car has a story, you know, and as you were reading or talking about, you know, the cycle cars in general, I'm thinking of the ones we have here and how they kind of fit into different categories. And I don't think there's a well-defined area they fit in, and that kind of what makes it interesting. But one of the things you did say is a lot of these cycle car people in this country were building them hoping they could export them. And I think of the Hanover there, and I think we talked about that on a previous show, that you could buy that with left or right hand steering, and the reason they did that is they were planning on exporting them to the Orient somewhere, one of the countries over there. And it was
and actually that one, it seems there are a good number of them in Japan. Probably more than there are here.
How about that?
In the United States.
Well, we got one in this state, so there could be twice as many in Japan.
Probably.
So, and also I look at the Dorrier gem. Mr. Dorrier was sort of I think he was an experimenter, and there's a lot of unique things on that car. I mean, you get the air-cooled engine, it's a V-type engine, and so on and so forth. And we rebuilt the rear suspension system on that, which actually is just a bunch of shaped bars that have a springing action to them, and the more bars you put in there, the stiffer it gets, and they just sort of sit in there. So rebuilding is, I was being sort of facetious there, but it's kind of interesting, and the way the Dorrier gem drove too, it was a shiv type thing instead of your usual drive shaft or belts or chains. You know, like this is a chain driven car here, so.
They're all different, and that's why that defining what a cycle car is very difficult, because experimentation was the name of the game, really.
And I'm sure a lot of these cars, since they were built in low numbers, if you had, let's say, 5 Hanovers or 5 Kelsey three-wheelers here, they might all be different too. We found
very
that
possible,
we found that out with our dials.
With our dials, exactly.
We know 4 of them, and 3 of them were at Dorrier Day, and you look at them parked next to each other, and they're all different. So, and it wasn't just one thing here or there; it was a lot of stuff. So,
and that's our cycle cars, but now we're going.
I think we're going back to the diner.
Back in the diner. We'll see you in the diner.
I am going to be talking about windshield glass, and this is something I thought about several months ago, and by golly, I had something hit not the windshield of my car but the side window, and this window has a crack in it. And Kendra, if you could kind of outline,
crack.
And so this helped me, and this is Exhibit A here, and now I'm going to be talking about it, and we'll find out about windshields and windows in cars. Back in the early parts of the automobile industry, cars did not have windows at all the way around. You look at cars from back in the 1800s, 1890, and so on and so forth, they're pretty much like boxes with bicycle tires and not much more than that, and you just sort of sat there. And they didn't go that fast either. But cars started speeding up, and you know, they needed protection, and so they wore goggles. And you know, you had these goggles on, and that was pretty much. They said, that's good enough there. But somewhere along the line, safety glass was invented, and we're talking 1903. There was a gentleman called Edward Benedictus. He's a French scientist. He accidentally knocked a glass flask off a shelf. When it broke, the pieces stayed together. He had a solution in there made from cellulose nitrate. That's what kind of held the glass together. Then soon after that, he read an article said the shattered glass windshields in cars were injuring people. Now, we're not talking the 1890 anymore. We're up to like 1910, 1908, somewhere in there. So he came up with the idea to create safety glass, and he patented it in 1910. He called it triplex, which was two pieces of glass with a cellulose nitrate in the middle. So if you broke it, it would be okay. Now he presented to car makers, and they says it's too expensive. We don't want to do that. Again, this is, as we were talking earlier, everything was experimental back then. Now, the windshields that they did have in the cars were dangerous. They were just made out of regular glass. We have windows here in the diner around us. It was the same sort of stuff, which is
that plate
smashed.
glass. Yep.
And made of ordinary window glass would shatter, of course. Glass shards would cut and impale people. And there was no side windows or rear windows. It was just a windshield.
Like the Kelsey.
Like the
Yeah,
Kelsey.
just a windshield.
Yep. In 1914, we're progressing a few years here, there was a report out and said 53% of all automobile injuries were caused by broken glass. 35% of them left indelible scars. 15% caused serious mutilation. Yeah, that kind of is a frightening word there, but that was 1914 reporting. And 2% were fatal. And again, the car companies are saying, we don't want to do this. You know, it's too expensive. We'll take our chances, I guess. Company down in Tacony, which is part of Philadelphia, in 1916, called Super Glass Company. They came out with this two pieces of glass with the cellulose nitrate in the middle. And let me read you a quote from Retail Motor Trade Journal, August 1916. A perfectly solid sheet possessing all the transparency of best plate glass combined with the strength of a sheet of metal and the resiliency of a billiard ball. It is further stated that a stone thrown against the sheet of superglass will rebound like a golf ball. A powerful blow may crack the glass into hairlines, but there is no shower of flying glass or splinters. So that's 1916. But again, the car companies weren't listening, but it was available. This is an aftermarket thing, 1960. A guy named Frank Schumann was building this item here. Said the product is so tough that a .22 caliber bullet fired at close range and test failed to penetrate, so it was real strong. I'm not sure if that's accurate or not, but I'm quoting it. If the glass is struck with a hammer or heavy rock, the only result is to mar the polished surface with a series of fine hairline cracks, and there is no shower of flying glass or splinters. But that is still aftermarket. The selling agent or distributor for his product was called Hires Turner Glass Company out of Philadelphia. They had a quote in their advertising. It says, the government has commandeered the production of superglass for use in aeroplanes, armored cars, gas masks, and other purposes, so that owners of private automobiles will not be able to purchase superglass for windshields and bodies until after the war. That was 1917, okay. So we have World War I. So again, the car makers weren't doing it, but they did see how safety glass protected the soldiers. The triplex, which was the brand name of Mr. Benedictus in Florida, or in France. They were over in this country and they were selling things, and a quote from them from 1918 says, time and time again, triplex goggles have saved the eyes of aviators, and triplex windows or shields have prevented the flyers from sustaining injuries. Recently, an airplane fitted with triplex windows struck a tree 30 feet from the ground, speed of 90 miles an hour, not a particle of glass that was separated from the window by the impact. And it's kind of interesting. In 1919, they continued, they had another thing, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's talking about regular safety glasses. And the stopping effects of glass upon rifle bullets must be seen to believe. I don't think they were shooting at somebody's eye, but that was that was it. And then it also says wearers of monocles will militarily reduce their consumption of lenses by the use of this glass. So Nobody wears monocles anymore.
I hope not.
Colonel Klink didn't, Hogan's Heroes. So anyway, so that's 1919. It took the war and the car manufacturers to see how good this stuff is. Then they started using it in automobiles. A series of lawsuits led up to stronger windshields. Most notable example of this is in 1917, Ford Motor Company had a case against a person named Payne, which I thought was interesting, like glass pane.
Cute, I like that.
And that he was only injured through reckless driving. That's what Ford said. Payne says no, it was because of your windshield. So between 1919 and 1929, Ford ordered the use of laminated glass in windshields of all vehicles. Now, 1926, this isn't laminated glass, it's not the cellulose nitrite stuff, but Stutz had a car they called the safety Stutz, and they had a lot of things. Again, 1926, hydraulic brakes, which is kind of just beginning, low center of gravity, vacuum operated, pop out turn signals, anti-theft system that you could buy as an option with the car. But the most important thing, 1926 was something called Protex safety glass. It actually had embedded wires in the windows. And it wasn't just the windshield, it was all the windows all around, even in like the little wind vent type windows on it. So that was pretty interesting. Wow. So they embedded these wires about 2.5 inch apart, and that was the safety glass. Now, Stutz mentioned here, and this is an advertisement from 1927. They had it 1926 and 27, and Stutz using this. And this is their own advertisement. It said, Protex safety glass cost the makers an extra $250,000 a year. So they're making a big deal. This is costing us a bunch. Now, if you think back 10 years prior, they're saying, well, we don't want to do it because it costs too much.
Yeah.
So, but Stutz was a higher end car. 1928, Pittsburgh Plate Glass, PPG, introduced its version of safety glass called the Dew Plate. Now, cars are really beginning to use it here. 1966-ish, somewhere in there, in the 60s, safety glass in all passenger cars made in the United States. Now, it's a standard vehicle safety feature, and I'm sure the government says you must have that.
Yep.
Okay. Anyway, laminated glass in today's windshields. It's made, the center part is a strong vinyl called PVP or polyvinyl butyrate. When it hit, it spiders just like this earlier stuff was doing. Also, the windshields on cars is glued in, and it's part of the structure of the car. So in other words, if you don't have the windshield in there, you know, there's a little bit of shifting going on with the body. It has a urethane adhesive doing it, designed specially for automobiles. And so I'm thinking, okay, they have that, but what about the side windows? Well, that's tempered glass, and it's used in the side and rear windows of cars. It's tempered with heat, strengthens glass 5 to 10 times that of untempered glass. Now, the windshield is not tempered. Side window it is. When tempered glass does break, it shatters into small, rounded fragments. It's easier to access a vehicle if there's an emergency. So that's the whole thinking behind it. And they don't have that in the windshield. They say, and I was trying to find, I was all over the internet looking, and they say, well, if something hits the windshield, it only has a small little cracks, and you can see through it, whereas the side glass is like a million little pieces, and it's foggy almost, so you can't see it. And so I'm thinking, on my side window that we showed you earlier, why didn't it break into a billion little pieces? And it's interesting, and it wasn't until I was bringing this in today, I'm looking at the box here, okay? This is the box the new piece came in, and it says laminated. And I look at this, and you can see it's 3 pieces here, so this is laminated. So I don't know what the deal is. It does say tempered, and so it's tempered glass, but it's also laminated, where I guess the windshield is not tempered. So I don't know how hard this would be to throw a rock through. There was only a little stone here, that
was just a little stone?
Oh yeah, a guy was trimming weeds on the side of the road. I was on my way to my country car show, and just a little dink, And I didn't think much of it until I came back out to my car, and there was this interesting little path on it. So that's it. And I did want to say real quick here before I go that this window, Fred Bean's Collision Center replaced it for me. Did an excellent job. I have Erie Insurance. They made everything nice and smooth. I said I'd give them a plug. So there you go. And that's.
Yeah, I'm sure not many people ask for their broken window.
No, I think I was the only one. And I'm hoping the museum has room in their dumpster because I've been sitting in my living room for 2 months. So, okay, and I noticed we only have a couple minutes, so.
You know, Fleetwood, we have Fleetwood metal body cars here, and reading about the process on building those cars, and this is back in like the 20s and teens, and it said the most dangerous job at Fleetwood was installing the windshields.
Wow, how about that?
The most dangerous one, because when plate glass breaks, you don't want to be nearby. You know.
So we've just been given the signal for 2 minutes.
Uh-oh.
So can we say goodbye?
I guess we can do that.
So
December 4th.
4th
Is the Holiday House Tour in Boyertown. We're a stop as always, so we hope you come and visit us. And then we're just gonna ride out the rest of the year.
And before we go, I'd like to thank all those who were here for the our Pie Day. And I have a feeling there are some people who came up to me and they've told me they've seen us on television, so we appreciate that.
Thank you.
And you know, it's neat when we meet them. You know,
it is. It was.
Even running into them in the grocery store, Kendra.
It was a great. Yeah, sorry. It was a great group of people here on Saturday. So
yeah.
Thank you all for coming out if you were here, and if not, like I said, we'll see you later.
Okay.
See you next month.